Hello and welcome to this first video on Photoshop. In this video, we'll just sort of get a little bit of an orientation to what Photoshop is all about. I'll show you some things, a few little hints. We'll just talk about images in general, nothing too much, but some of the basics here that if you haven't used Photoshop before, you might not be aware of. And if you have used Photoshop, you might have forgotten, or just a good refresher. Anyways, opening up Photoshop here, I'm just going to open up an image. So you can open a variety of different images in Photoshop, JPEGs, PNGs, other Photoshop files, raw image files. There's a bunch of things that Photoshop can open up. So I'm going to just find one, open. I think I put it, now that I'm thinking about it, it might not no longer be in my downloads here. Oh, there it is. There. So I just have a picture, and we'll just sort of talk about it sort of in general. So when you open up an image in Photoshop, a couple things that you'll notice. One is that down here, you have the resolution and you have the size of the image, and it's measured in pixels there. So you can see in the bottom left, we've got our width and our height, and it says 72 pixels per inch, and so that's the resolution. So, and then the channels there, 3 colors, so it's RGB. 8 BPC stands for 8 bits per color, and that gives us, 8 times, or 8 plus 8 plus 8 is 24 bits of color. You also hear it referred to as that. And that refers to that gives you about 16.8 million different colors. Yeah, in terms of Photoshop here, if you're not used to it, on the left side is your toolbar. Anything with those little sort of triangles at the bottom right indicate that there is more options there. Okay, so you can click and hold, or you can right click and it sort of opens them up as well. Based on what tool you have selected, these are this bar up here will the tool, it's not really a toolbar, but this sort of the options bar here will give you a bunch of different controls depending on what tool you have selected from the toolbar. The other thing that we've got here, of course, is a bunch of menu system. Okay, so your old style of menu system is there. We'll come back to that in a second. And on the far right side, you have some different things. The most important thing probably being the layers, and we'll get into layers a little bit later on. But basically, the magic of Photoshop occurs because you've got layers here. And you can add and remove layers and add adjustment layers, and we'll see that in a little bit. In terms of rough navigation, what I've got is if I use my mouse, okay, and I just sort of use the scroll button, I can scroll up and down, okay? And, you could use these guys, these sliders here, which is fine, but obviously just using the mouse is a little bit quicker. But then you might say, well, how can I do this left and right? Well, if you hold the control key down and the middle mouse button, then you can move left or right. So I've got the control key pressed down on the keyboard and then the scroll wheel on the mouse going left, up and down, I guess, and that helps translate it into left and right movement. Let go of the control key and it reverts back to up and down. Now, some people like to zoom in with the zoom in tool. I don't know if I've ever really used the zoom tool very often, right? You can click, click, click. Yeah, okay, it works. And I think if you hit Control or Alt, it goes minus and you can zoom out. Okay, useful. But to me, because you're going to zoom in and out, and going to the zoom tool all the time is a bit of a pain. If you just hold the Alt key down, you can zoom in and let go, and then, hold the Alt key and zoom out. So, and wherever your mouse is, that's kind of where it's focusing on. So there's a person in the car. So I can zoom out, and I can zoom way out, or I can start to zoom in, okay? And then so I can completely navigate just with my mouse and get to the place that I want. And so if I just zoom in here, let's just take a look. Now, as you get in, things become a little bit pixelated. And so we can start to see that it's not quite as perfect as it looked like from afar. So that's because all images are made up of these little dots, right? These squares, and these squares are called pixels. And each pixel has one color. We can see that if we open up our little sort of color picker here, and you put your mouse over top, it turns into this dropper, and you can click on the different colors. And what you'll notice is that I click that this percent of R, G, and B, red, green, and blue, change based upon the color. So obviously if it's white, it's pretty well all the colors. Remember, white is all the colors. If it's something black, I don't know if I've got anything dark, dark, dark here, but you'll notice that numbers get reduced, okay? Because black is basically the absence of light, so it's set to 0, 0, 0. And then yellow would be, it's got more red and green. Full red and green gives you that yellow with 0 blue. And you can see it's, these aren't pure yellows, but you can get that idea. I can move over here, and you can see that a little bit better if I went to more pure yellow. Right, and those numbers are getting pretty close, to 255s there, and no blue. All right, so one thing else you might notice here is that there's a number as well. This is the hexadecimal color code. So you often see color codes as RGB or as a hexadecimal, usually with this pound key in front of it. And then also sort of a newer one, this HSB, which I haven't really, it's like hue, saturation, and can't remember what B stands for. I don't usually use that. Generally I'll see this, I guess it's also this L too. I think this is included. But usually it's the RGB or the hexadecimal. So again, basic ideas here. Being able to pull out, right, zoom out, zoom in, that's holding the Alt key, left and right scrolling with the Control key, and if you don't hold anything down, you can go up and down. Now, a couple other just very, very little quick things, right? If I wanted to, I don't know if there's anything I can remove here. Maybe I'm not too happy with this little bit of grass or something here. There's some neat little things you can do. We can add a layer, okay? So if I add a layer here with this little plus button, we create a layer. Now that layer, at the moment, you can see the black, sort of, I guess, gray and white checkerboard. That means that it's an empty layer. So if I turn this bottom layer off, there's nothing there. So everything is transparent. This check means that it's transparent. And then you can start to put things on that layer. Now, for example, I could take my brush tool and draw something on it. Okay. Ooh, I'm putting, drawing on the car. Barely see it in there. You can actually make some changes. If you want to make this larger, just a second here. I sometimes forget. There we are. Just right and clicking, large thumbnails there. Hard to see still, but there is some writing on there. I can obviously turn that off and it's gone. Okay, now this is the nice thing about layers. If I had done it on the original one, it'd be much more difficult to remove it. Because it's on a separate layer, I can simply grab, say, the eraser tool. Sorry, I don't know why it keeps flashing here when it does this. I can grab the eraser tool, which is hiding somewhere here. There it is. And if I make that a bit bigger, just the brush, then I can just simply erase it. And I don't have to worry about what's going on sort of underneath, because that's on a completely separate layer. If I did use the eraser on this layer, then I have problems, because if I can't press Control Z, I've damaged the image. So using a separate layer is really, really useful. Now, some of the power of Photoshop, I can just simply do a selection here. So let's just say I'm not too happy with this little bit of grass. Just use my selection tool and grab that. And what I can do is basically use the power of Photoshop to kind of clean up the grass if I'm really worried about this grass here. So I think if I go under, where is it? Image, I'm looking for fill here. Layer, there's always different things. Okay, so fill, there we are. And in fact, there's a content aware fill. And if you do that, now it's sort of, this is where it's sampling from. Okay, so it's actually showing me here, and I can change a few of these settings, but I'm just going to press enter. Boom. And now Control D will deselect, and there it looks pretty good. Maybe I'm not happy, and actually you can see in this layer, just before I stop, that that's there. So you can just go back and forth between the before and after just to see the difference there. Maybe I don't like this white, whatever it is, sign here. I'm very particular. Again, just a little click. Okay, where was that? Layer, sorry, edit, fill, content aware fill. And so it's going to choose from there. Sure. See what happens? And there we go. Now it's picked a little bit of Control D. It's not perfect, but again, if I zoom way out, I don't notice it as much as I did before. So that's just some of those neat little things that you can do with Photoshop, okay? So I've got that standing out or not, different layers. Now one last thing, perhaps, well maybe two things here before we wrap this one up. One is if you lose menus. So for example, these things can come off and get lost, and then you're like, Mr. Fleming, where's my layers? Things get really messed up. I mean, the easiest thing is if you go to Window here, you can rearrange your workspace. And so the best thing to do is reset Essentials, and everything comes back. So if you can't find anything, your menus have gone missing, and you're wanting to go back to how you had it, Workspace, and then Reset Essentials is your friend. However, you can also see that there's a bunch of menus that pop up here. And so if you need a specific one, like sometimes the history one's nice to have, you can see everything you've done. You can pull that out and then pull it down and be able to see what's sort of going on and go back to whatever stage you wanted to go back to. All right, one last thing I'll mention is just cropping images. This is a very common technique. This is your crop tool, and there's a bunch of different things that you can do. You can do a bunch of preset ratios. So if you know you needed a square image of it, you can set that to square and then sort of work from there. If you know it has to be the old school 5:7 image, you can do that and then just swap that around. And so very quickly you can get that set up. This grid that appears here, this is the rule of thirds, so everything divided into 3, or whatever you want to set here. I'm not going to go into these, but just to give you an idea. Then you can move, the picture around. Obviously, that's the crop over here. So let's just see if I did this, and I can bring that in. So let's just say I wanted to do something a little bit more stylish. I can move the car over, maybe something like that. So if I wanted to just get part of that picture and get a certain ratio, certain size to fit something, the crop tool works really well. All you have to do is either press enter or the little check mark up here. And now you can choose either to delete the crop pixels or keep them. Now, it might be a good idea to keep them if you're wanting to come back to the image. I'll talk about saving here. I think I can do that. Anyways, I'm going to just delete those cropped images and then go boom. And there we go. There's my image now. Okay, better or worse? I don't know, but it is different. Now, in terms of saving, you're going to save it as, so you can go, I would always suggest, going save as here, saving to your computer. You've got a choice. If you want to keep it as a PSD file, that means you can come back and there's your layers to work on. So if you've done lots of changes and you might want to go back and make some more changes to that one, I highly suggest saving it as a PSD file, as well as if you want to show the photo to somebody, share it, print it, put it on a website, you're going to have to save it as something else. So you can choose what you want to save it as. And I'm not 100% sure why this is happening here. It never used to happen like that. So I'm going to save this just to see here. File, save as on your computer, and large document and TIFF. Usually you can save it as a PSD, or not PSD, sorry, as a JPEG. Oh, there we are. Okay, so they've changed it a little bit. What did I just have to press there? Save a copy. I guess what they've tried to do is prevent you from overwriting the original. So save a copy, and therefore I can do it in all the different formats. So JPEG is typical, PNG is typical, especially if you want to maintain the transparency, and a few other ones that you might be familiar with. But those are the two big ones. So if you want to share, put it on a website, print it out, you're probably going to save it as a PNG or a JPEG and have that available to you. All right, So good, that will finish this video, and we'll get doing some real adjustments in the next one.